devoted to spreading the ideas of liberty among the global Muslim community and refuting common myths and stereotypes about Muslims here in the US. The efforts of M4L have assisted in developing or birthing libertarian movements in places like Pakistan, Qatar, Turkey, Bangladesh, Malaysia, and many others. Coley has been listed among Anarchist's 2015 11 Libertarians Doing Big Things and was awarded in 2013 the Liberty Inspiration Award. He currently hosts The Call to Freedom, an international satellite radio broadcast on LRN.FM, where he interviews the most influential voices in contemporary Islamic scholarship? I don't know. About issues commonly defined as libertarian, and broadcast those conventions live via satellite to a geographic region home to about 300 million Muslims, exploring the ideas of liberty directly to areas that need it most from a perspective the locals can relate to. He has spent most of the last 6 years as a traveling lecturer advocating the ideas of liberty as often as possible, as loudly as possible to all who are willing to hear. So help me in welcoming Will Coley to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Will Coley. The purpose of today's discussion is freedom of speech and freedom of movement. You know, how those are foundational in a free society. Today, I'm introducing someone that is actually a hero of my own, Mr. Amir Nasr. Now, he is a writer, an activist, a refugee. He wears many hats, but the work that he's done in free speech is particularly inspirational to me, as the area of the world that he's done this in is an area of the world that I also work in. He wrote a great book called My Isl, How Fundamentalism Destroyed My Mind and Doubt Freed My Soul. A book that I absolutely encourage all of you to go out, buy it, read it. It is definitely a good investment of your time. Without any more gilding of the lily by myself, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Amir Nasr.
Alright, sound check looks good. I can hear you guys. I'm guessing you can hear me. So, greetings from Vancouver, Canada. Yes, I put on a blazer at 8:30 a.m. in the morning, although I'm still wearing my pajama pants. So it's great to be here with you, and there's so much one can talk about in regards to the topic of free speech, especially given the times that we live in. And so rather than touch on so many different points, I'm just going to share with you a brief story that will highlight a lot on its own. And you can feel free to interpret it however you like. And then in the Q&A, we'll dive deeper and we'll have an interaction and learn some stuff from each other, because I've got some stuff to learn from you as well. In 2006, I discovered the liberal Arab blogosphere by accident. At the time, I was living in Malaysia, the son of Sudanese parents, both Afro-Arabs, and I had just left Qatar years prior. Moved to Malaysia and joined an international school. First a British international school and then eventually an American international school, hence the weird American-ish sounding accent. You get asked about that a lot. So the transition from Qatar to Malaysia and to going to an international school was very abrupt, and it shook up my life quite violently. I started to ask a lot of questions that I had put aside and had swept under the rug. And I remember coming back home from school one day distinctly and asking my mom and saying, "Mom, can I be friends with the infidel kids?" And she just looked at me and she's like, what kind of stupid question is that? Since when do we judge people by their religious affiliation? See, when my mom in Malaysia she's like, what kind of garbage were they teaching you there? So I started sharing with her what I had learned at the time. She just thought that I was learning the same kind of Islam that she grew up learning, that was more mellow, that just it was focused more on piety and becoming a better person and charity and so on. It wasn't politicized. It didn't have these grand ambitions. It didn't have a very, us versus them kind of perspective. So little does she know how, over time, things have that were mine, and that were systematically stolen away from me in the worst kind of thievery. And the worst kind of thievery being the kind of theft that you don't even know happened. So I discovered the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and now I'm grappling with different interpretations of Islam that I've been exposed to, many of them authoritarian, that don't really make room for human rights. Some very tolerant, very open, inquisitive, coming from a place of love and compassion, and a genuine desire to want to connect. And I didn't know how to make sense of it. So what did I do? I started venturing into other segments of the blogosphere, outside the Arab liberal blogosphere. And I discovered the American Muslim blogosphere, and I also discovered the American right-wing blogosphere. Back when it was a nascent movement. This was still in 2006, 2007, 2008. Some of you may remember that time, websites like Little Green Footballs, or websites that are still around and very popular like Jihad Watch, that have come from the fringes and made it into the mainstream. And so I would engage in all of these different discussions and debates with people in the comment sections via email. And was I triggered? Yes. Did the term trigger warning exist back then? No. And you know what? I'm glad I was triggered. I'm glad I was pissed off during those discussions. Because while a lot of what was said in those comment sections, in the discussions and the arguments back and forth, while a lot of what was said was nonsensical and very bigoted, in my opinion, some of it was true. I did my research, went into Wikipedia, went to the library, right? Verified that this was knowledge that had an empirical basis, that was evidence-based. Evidence still counts. Facts still count, even in this era. And I realized that a lot of what was said, yes, wasn't great, but some of it was true, even if it made me uncomfortable. And that brings me to today and debates we find on campuses across the United States, and also increasingly here in Canada. So I arrived in Canada 3 years ago. The journey of blogging led me to author the book that was mentioned earlier. The book got banned in Malaysia. It was published by St. Martin's Press in New York, distributed internationally, had a good release in the United States. But it was banned in Malaysia. I was threatened. Don't want to go into the details. But I had to leave everything behind and then seek political asylum in Canada. And thankfully Canada took me in. But as Canada took me in 3 years ago, and I started to understand the situation here more intimately, and also what was going on in the United States more intimately, to be honest, I was increasingly shocked. Because my perception of the United States and what it means to study on an American campus was, you could say, naive and rather idealistic. Or maybe it was informed and it wasn't so idealistic, but what had happened is that in the last few years, things have shifted and I didn't catch up. So being here, I read all these articles and I see all these different debates among my American friends who are younger than me, who are still in university, talking about freedom of speech on campus and how we should ban the speaker and not have that other speaker, and these concepts like trigger warnings are emerging, safe spaces, and it was just shocking and horrifying to me. Because had those concepts existed in the blogosphere, for instance, had those concepts existed anywhere, that would have hindered my learning. It would have hindered my ability to unlearn things that were not true, right? It would have hindered my ability to question and engage with subjects that made me feel very uncomfortable. And I would not be who I am today. And so I find myself very disturbed by this growing trend, especially within, it happens very much on the left. The right has a lot of its problems, and we'll get into that. And so, if that continues, it's going to hinder our learning. Now, the right looks at that and says, you know, well, screw trigger warnings, screw safe spaces, these are all just BS concepts, and they double down on more of the same, which has been harmful over time. I don't completely dismiss the need for trigger warnings or safe spaces. Some do have a lot of trauma, and to come into a classroom with that trauma, and then have that trauma be triggered in discussions, that can cause great unease and discomfort. So I do find it to be a legitimate concern. However, I don't think university is a place to resolve that. I think we could all use more counseling, more therapy, right? More healing. And so it is completely legitimate to talk about trigger warnings and having safe spaces, but I think that's a job that's more suited for psychologists and counselors and so on. Because when it comes to the classroom, I don't believe we should have such concepts. I believe we should engage fully. We should talk about things that make us uncomfortable. And that means we should be able to meet one another. Because if we just end up spewing boisterous rhetoric masquerading as free speech, with no basis in facts, no basis in evidence, we're just talking past each other, we're just venting, and so let's keep venting if that's what we really want, although I doubt it, because I think deep down inside, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, whatever, deep down inside, what we really want is to genuinely engage in good faith. So enough of the boisterous rhetoric, and let's have some genuine free speech and be able to meet one another, even if we end up disagreeing, because the opposite of that is a recipe for disaster. And that's what has happened in authoritarian states, region that I come from. It's not just a matter of disagreement between two sides, no, it is outright vilification and dehumanization, which just leads to more division, and which really empowers the authoritarian forces. So we have to be able to take a step back, because there's a lot here that's at stake that's going to affect us all. And that's really it for my brief opening remarks. And we'll jump into the Q&A.
All right. So, Ahmed, Amir, sorry. So, I actually had a couple questions of my own that I wanted to start off with. One, a lot of us have seen this video that's come out about the Socialist Fight Club at the University of Central Florida, the Trump and other members of his cabinet's pinatas. Now, I actually used to do an event in that area called Learning on the Lawns once a week for 2 years from 2008 through 2010 in that exact same space. And we got people from all different sides together, and Christians, Muslims, Jews, socialists, atheists, Republicans, libertarians, having these discussions like you're talking about you thought campuses would be. What I found, and I just want your commentary on this, is that there's been this acceptance, this embracing of an almost Wahhabi-style viewpoint, that the age of, you'll understand this comment better than most of the crowd, the age of ijma, the age of qisas is closed. And that seems to be the argument that you're getting from the left now, is that the discussions are closed. There's no more debate, there is no more discussion. My idea is the right idea and anyone else's idea is not. Would you say that's a fair comparison of that Wahhabist, no discussion, and it's slowly creeping into the left and right in the mainstream dialogue?
I would say that, to use the term Wahhabi, and I'm not sure where it came from, I would consider that inflammatory, because the Wahhabi doctrine, well, let's look at Saudi Arabia. Stonings, beheadings, chopping off of hands, all kinds of insanities, while the Muslim world, much of it just looks in horror. And some are very much under the spell of Saudi Arabia, and they're sort of caught up and they go, well, that's Saudi Arabia, isn't Mecca over there? Not understanding that Mecca is in the Arabian Peninsula, which back then was not Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a modern construct. So to impose the term Wahhabism and sort of say what the left is doing is similar, I would consider that inflammatory. That said, I would say that the left has demonstrated kind of a similar attitude, not as harsh, of course, nowhere near as extreme, but still very troubling. In the sense that, yes, we've talked about all these different subjects, equality, affirmative action, LGBTQ rights, and that's it. The discussion is closed, and you conservatives really just need to get on and get moving. And yeah, any disagreements, you guys are bigots and you're racists. I don't think that's helpful. And let me just clarify and explain why a little bit. So, I was born and raised in the Muslim tradition, the Islamic tradition. And today I consider myself a cultural Muslim and a spiritual humanist. Given the nature of the times that we live in, I find myself, politically speaking, to obviously be very left-leaning, very liberal, because it is the Democratic Party that is looking out for the interests of minorities and that is coming out and speaking out against Islamophobia and so on. And we'll get into the term Islamophobia later. I think it's very important to talk about it. And so naturally, when there's a party or the left-leaning paradigm wants to take care of the minorities and so on, and I feel under siege from the right and I'm being demonized, of course I'm gonna say, okay, dear left, I'm gonna be part of this because I'm not welcome there and it's horrifying and it's scary, so I'm just gonna hang out here. There is a lot of tendency to do that for very understandable reasons, given the dynamics that we're in. However, having grown up in a traditional conservative context and then gone into an American school with a very internationalist sort of paradigm, and then found myself evolving from a traditional worldview into a modern worldview, and then eventually into a postmodern worldview, and now I'm integrating all the three. I'm integrating the best of the traditional worldview, the best of the modern worldview, and the best of postmodernity. There's a way to integrate that. That's how I see it. And so I don't discard tradition. I think there are a lot of important things with a traditional worldview that we should bring on with us. And so when I look at Republicans, and I'm not talking about Republicans, again, who engage in boisterous rhetoric, I'm talking about conservative thinkers, conservative intellectuals. I find that they have many valid critiques of what you can call leftist orthodoxy or liberal orthodoxy. And so looking at it from the outside, I do find that the left has that troubling attitude of the discussion is over, it's been figured out. Whereas I can actually see, well, no, some of what intellectuals on the conservative side are saying is valid and we need to be paying attention to it. And it's not that this is right at the expense of this, it's that we need to find an integration of the best of viewpoints from both sides. Because I don't think the left has all the answers. And the charge that can be smug and so on, I think, to be honest, sometimes does have validity.
All right, the other question was more of a kind of drawing commentary out of you. Since the main focus of this event is free speech, I was wondering if you could comment on the fact that your most renowned scholars in the Islamic tradition today are all targeted as possible assassination candidates specifically for advocating free speech.
Yeah. Well, so in simple terms, let's just put it this way. In the Muslim world, in every Muslim majority country, maybe with the exception of Turkey, but not for very long. So we could just go ahead and say in every single Muslim majority country, Islam doesn't just arise organically. In every of those countries, there is a ministry of religious affairs. It has different names in different countries, but the concept is essentially the same. It's a ministry of religious affairs. And so by virtue of having a ministry of religious affairs, Islamic affairs, and the fact that that ministry is attached to an authoritarian dictatorial government, you are not going to have a flourishing of interpretation of Islam that promotes free speech, that promotes freedom of thought, because that's just going to undermine those dictatorships. So it is in their interests to push out interpretations of Islam that command obedience, I would say even blind obedience, that don't encourage critical thinking, right? And that ask you to fall in line. And so Islam, the way it's taught and the way it's practiced, and I always like to make this distinction, okay? It's not about Islam in a blanket sense. It's Islam, the way it's taught and the way it's practiced in much of the Muslim world today, because of the role of authoritarian governments, is a disaster. And we have to be very blunt in our criticism, because that's the fact of the matter, not Islam, but the way it's taught and the way it's practiced. Now, there are a lot of liberal thinkers, a lot of youth movements that are really pushing back, and you have an emergence of what scholars have called popular Islam. In Saudi Arabia, you have so many Saudi women now engaging online, pushing feminist arguments for reinterpreting Islam, and they draw those arguments right out of the Islamic tradition. So these things are extremely fascinating, and we never used to see them in the past because the discourse was so tightly controlled by those in power. Now with the internet, it no longer is. We hear headlines about how ISIS is using the internet to radicalize youth and turn them into bloodthirsty extremists, and there is truth to that. But the story that's not being reported on is that by far and large, there's actually a huge positive influence that the internet is having, because it's opening up the space for debate and for free speech, and obviously those in power don't like it. But they can't stop it. It just is what it is, and the train has left the station, so to speak.
Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite one of those scholars that are standing up and speaking out? I don't mean political activists, I mean like Islamic academics, people who have ijaza, and who are classically trained in Islamic jurisprudence, who are out there advocating free speech, advocating free expression, advocating freedom of movement and things like this. Do you have a fave that like the audience could look up?
Absolutely, and I would credit him with a lot of the transformations that I went through. So he's originally from Sudan. He's based in the United States. So he's a Sudanese-born American scholar of Islam at this point in human rights, and his name is Professor Abdullahi An-Naim, who teaches at Emory University. He's got a number of publications, including out from Harvard University. So one of his best books that you can get is called Islam and the Secular State, The Future of Sharia. So he is making an argument for secularism based on his interpretation of Islam. And here's what he says, and I find it to be very powerful because we don't even have to elaborate too much. Here's what he says: if I don't have the freedom to disbelieve, I cannot truly believe. Meaning, only in a secular state can I be a genuine Muslim or a genuine Christian or a genuine Jew. Because only in a secular state can I choose freely and willingly what my beliefs are going to be. Therefore, there is sincerity. But as soon as you have an authoritarian government, you can no longer really believe what you want to believe and choose to do so willingly, because you will be doing it under fear. And that is insincere, and it creates an environment rife with hypocrisy. So I would highly encourage you guys, wherever you're out there, if you're curious, to check out Abdullah Naim. He teaches at Emory University. Or frankly, you can just get my book, because I talk about him in there and numerous other scholars. But yeah, Professor Abdullah is definitely one of my intellectual heroes.
All right, so some of the rest of the audience. Anybody else got questions out here in the audience this afternoon? The title of Amir's book was My Isl, how fundamentalism stole my mind and doubt freed my soul.
Okay, so first, thank you for being here, even though it's over Skype, Amir. But I was wondering, particularly a question in the context of Canadian politics, the self-described conservative leadership contender, the self-described libertarian Maxime Bernier, has recently come out against motion M103, which would condemn all forms of Islamophobia due to the fact that it fails to define Islamophobia. I'm curious what you think as to whether or not M103 does infringe on free speech and whether it'll actually do anything to stop Islamophobia.
Thank you. So I've read very briefly about that motion in the news media. Honestly, I haven't looked into the details, so I can't really comment about that specifically, or Maxime's comments in specific, but it does tie very directly into what I mentioned earlier, and thank you for reminding me of it, this term Islamophobia. The term Islamophobia, I find it to be quite troubling, and I have mixed feelings about it. And I'll explain why. And it's precisely because we don't seem to have an agreed upon definition. And I think that's going to be the case to some extent. But we need to be able to talk about it. So there are many, many cases of legitimate Islamophobia, and I would even say that there is a rise in Islamophobia. It is growing, and it's very disturbing and very concerning. The issue, however, is when there are legitimate critiques of Islam or Islamism, and you have certain organizations and certain prominent individuals from the Muslim community fighting back and saying, how dare you say that, you're an Islamophobe, this is Islamophobic. So what I'm getting at is that some individuals have abused that term in order to silence legitimate critique. Now, what is legitimate, what is not, that's part of the debate. I personally prefer anti-Muslim bigotry. There are cases where it's about blatant Islamophobia. So if you look at Switzerland a few years ago, it banned the construction of minarets. That's a symbol. It's not about people, it's not about Muslims, it's a symbol of Islam, right? Minarets in the mosques, they were banned. I would say that's Islamophobia, because that has to do with the symbols of Islam and so on. People are afraid of it, like, oh my God, we don't want minarets. So that's Islamophobia. And they were banned, the minarets. Anti-Muslim bigotry, on the other hand, has to do with people themselves. And so I have a clear, bright red line when it comes to anti-Muslim bigotry or anti-anyone bigotry, right? Because I'm a humanist. So anti-Muslim bigotry, I think it's very clear and definitive. Islamophobia, it's a more contentious word because there's no agreed upon definition. And I think in the context of Canada, if this motion is passed to condemn Islamophobia, in principle, I'm all for it 100%, to acknowledge that it's there and it exists and to condemn it. In principle, I'm all for it. But when it comes to the actual definition of the word, what we mean by it, how that could affect politics and important discussions that we need to have, I have mixed feelings because the liberals and the left, we all need to acknowledge that the right wing, populism is ascendant, and there is a real sort of nationalist sentiment that's on the rise, not just in America, but also here in Canada. And so rather than just completely shutting it out and demonizing it, saying Islamophobic and this and that I feel exacerbates the problem and the divisions. Again, we need to be able to have engagement and conversation and use less inflammatory language.
Comment to what Ahmed is saying and your question. The first thing I would say personally is you can't outlaw stupid. It doesn't work. And it kind of goes with the commentary of the gentleman that was up here before, and that when you try to use the state to prevent people from expressing, even if it's a personal prejudice, what you do is you create a victim complex. These people believe that they are martyrs, and like, I'm not personally a fan of Milo, but I would never say that he shouldn't be allowed to speak at the university in my city. What I would choose rather to do is to go challenge him to academic